You're gonna
Okay, so
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gerome Rothman,
and I'm Oren Frankum.
we are today doing our first Tozen Daigaku in a while. So some of you know that in our union, we put together a series on different issues in labor law and also maybe Japanese labor culture or just general issues. I think we've done one on harassment. We've done a couple about fixed term contracts and the 5-year rule. Recently, I appeared in a Tozen Daigaku on how to read financial documents. And so some of the Tozen Daigaku we have done over the years have been fairly serious. This time, as you can tell, we might be taking a slightly lighter approach today. So we haven't done one in a while, and we thought, what would be something kind of fun to do, and something that we might be able to put together easily, but also, kind of reintroduce Tozen Daigaku in a way that was, like I said, a little lighter. And something that's an idea that I came up with, and Oren was good enough to agree to this proposal, was to talk about something that we do a lot of here, and that's labor consultations. So some of you may have been in a labor consultation and not even known it, but labor consultations are something that organizers like myself do a lot of here at Tozen. So we're going to talk a little bit about labor consultations, and I'll define what a consultation is. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to introduce myself maybe a little bit more. Yeah, so I'm originally from the United States, and I came to Japan in 2006. Before that, I was an organizer at SEIU 775, which is now called SEIU 775 Northwest. SEIU stands for Service Employees International Union, and I was an organizer in Seattle. Things in the United States are quite different than they are here, but it was overall a good experience. And when I came to Japan, I found a way into the Japanese labor movement, and eventually in 2010, Tozen was founded. And shortly thereafter, I started training to be an organizer. I'm now a full-time organizer here at Tozen Union. I'm here full-time, and I do that kind of work. A lot of people may not know what an organizer is or what an organizer does, so I might spend a little time covering that. But before I do that, maybe Oren, you want to introduce yourself a little bit too?
Yeah, so I am Oren Frankum, as previously stated. I am a union member and in Tozen, and more specifically the Shane Workers Union, and I am also one of Tozen's organisers, and often also in charge of the YouTubes. Right.
Yeah. Oren organizes the Tozen Daigaku as well as trainee organizer and some of the other work that he does here. Yeah. You'll notice I said trainee organizer. In many ways, all organizers are trainees all the time. We're always learning. And sometimes I still feel like a trainee organizer, but the main thing that an organizer does is, it sounds pretty obvious, it's going to organize things. So we are often the case officer or the person who's primarily responsible for helping the chapters of Tozen, which are often based on workplaces, organize meetings, organize their discussions or collective bargainings with management, and other work that we sometimes call casework, right? Oftentimes organizers, you'll see if you join Tozen or you're a member, that we're running around, like, getting the meetings together, that kind of thing. It's a lot of very different tasks that we do, but maybe we should also be responsible for making sure that the papers stay on the wall behind us. But one of the many roles that we play is we're often the first contact that people, either before they're members or when they are members, we're often the first contact that people have with Tozen Union and with the with the labor movement in general. And on many occasions, people will send us an email because they're having some kind of problem at work or a question, and will give us either a brief or not so brief outline of what the issue is. And usually the response you're going to get to that is, hey, so we'd like to have a consultation with you. When can you meet? And it'll often be on Zoom, or perhaps we'll meet in the office. But usually between a half hour and an hour, these consultations go. And this is where you as either the member or prospective member can ask questions, not just about the union, but about your own specific work experience or work questions, your own specific legal questions. And those conversations are often very, I think they're useful because it gives people an opportunity to get their questions answered, but also find out what they can do to either resolve problems that they have at the workplace or do something to improve their working conditions. So they're very important conversations. Oftentimes, if you're contacting us with that kind of an inquiry, you might be upset, or you might be a little bit frustrated, you being the prospective member or member, or just might want to have a general curiosity about something that you read about us. So there's just a lot of there's a huge diversity of consultations, and we couldn't possibly, or I should say we couldn't possibly, but it would actually be quite difficult, I think, to do a Tozen Daigaku on how to do a labor consultation. But we do notice that there are patterns that come up in labor consultations that I'm calling tricky situations. And these are areas where, things that come up frequently in consultations that either sometimes I wish the person who'd come had known in advance, maybe so that we could be better prepared. Sometimes I just, when I hear them often enough that it has created a kind of constant where I'm saying the same things over and over again. And, if you're an organizer, you're okay with that. That's part of the job. But I do think that maybe if you have some of these things in mind on the way into consultations, you might get more out of it. So that's the main purpose. Before I get into what some of these tricky situations are, I do want to make a few disclaimers. So we do want to take a lighter, maybe more fun attitude about it if we can, but I don't want anyone to feel like if you do one of these things in a consultation, oh my God, you've made a mistake. You can't really make a mistake in a labor consultation if you're coming to seek advice. And if you do all 10 of these things, that doesn't mean, oh, you did something wrong and we're judging you or laughing at you or anything like that. It's more that we are thinking of ways so that people can get the most out of consultations, but also perhaps for those of you who've been through a consultation and maybe noticed that this came up, you might be able to reflect on it and chuckle a little bit and think, oh yeah, I did that too, yeah. And that's fine. Again, I don't want anyone to feel judged or laughed at or at all. It's perfectly okay to come in and ask any questions you want. And it's the organizer's job to redirect the conversation or answer your questions in a way that's comfortable. And, but at the same time, these are some things you might want to be aware of, might make your time in a consultation just a little bit more smooth and allow you to use some of that time for more substantial things than stuff that you could have known in advance, I guess, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of, we're not trying to criticize, we're just trying to help make sure that you can get the most out of what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Just to get the most out of it. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to do a little bit of role playing. We're not going to role play all 10. There's a couple that we're just going to talk about, but that'll come at the end. But we're going to do a little bit of a role play and stop the role play at periodic points. I might point out some mistakes that Oren made as the organizer, and then I might point out what tricky moments came up that you might be able to in advance be aware of so that you don't have to fall into them, I guess is the way to put it. So Oren, would you like to start the consultation?
Yeah, so yeah.
All right.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for coming. What's your problem?
My problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm Gerome Rothman. I work at Tozen Daigaku. I'm an English teacher, and I'm worried that my company may not renew me. So I went to the labor office and I asked them.
So this labor office is a LABOR or LABOUR?
What does that have to? Okay, now let's stop. Okay, so first of all, just to show you that we're reflective about our work, Oren made a few mistakes as the organizer to start with. So Oren didn't introduce the organization. Oren didn't give Oren didn't give their name. So we're going to talk about pronouns in a second, but Oren didn't give their name. Oren didn't engage in any small talk or anything like that. And it is important to make people comfortable. So the tricky moment that the member walked into is, you'll probably notice that I said I went to the labor office. And that one is one we hear a lot. I went to the labor office, or some version of that that's sometimes closer to the name of an actual office, like the Labor Commission or the Labor Board or something like that. The reason why this is a bit tricky is because we don't always realize this, but there are many quote unquote labor offices in Japan. There's Hello Work, or in Japanese you would pronounce it Harawaka. I think my pronunciation isn't always great. There's the Labor Standards Office, or Rodo Kijun Kantokusho. There's the Rodo Kyoku, or the Labor Bureau. There is something called Labor Commission, which is one of the offices we in Tozen deal with frequently. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, could you give us a little bit of background on sort of these different places, like what's Hello Work, etc.?
Well, an example would be using Hello Work. Hello Work would be something akin to the unemployment office. So that would be where you would apply for benefits if you lost your job. Also, perhaps seek help related to reemployment. I also think you would go there if you were filing a claim that you had some injury at work or something, so that was covered by your accident insurance. But the other examples I gave, Labor Standards Office is the office that's responsible for the enforcement of labor standards law. Labor Commission protects the rights of trade unions. So these are just some examples. The point I want to make is not that you should know all of this in advance of a labor consultation. Of course you shouldn't. But if you did visit one of these offices, and almost all of these offices provide general labor consultations, it's generally a good idea if you find out some details. So for example, what is the name of that office in English and Japanese if possible? If you got a contact name, it would be a good idea for you to get that. It's almost always really easy to get this information when you visit the office, because most people have meishi or business cards that they use to for that purpose. So grab that, and that way, rather than creating the next question that Oren would have asked me, which is, which office was it? You would know in advance, and that would give the organizer a better idea of what kind of advice you got. While all of these offices do labor consultations, they also all have their own specialties. And so you might not be getting 100% of that specific advice on that one issue that you might have been hoping for. So these are the things that we would want to cover. So know which labor office you went to. That's the main thing, if you can. If you do turn up to a consultation and you find out that you don't know or don't remember, that's okay. There might be some clues that you might be able to give us, like what was the address of the office. Even sometimes if you tell us the station, we've probably been there. So, oh, and finally, this is for you, Oren.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely don't want to be making fun of the countries that people come from. So the OUR stuff is something that we tease each other about here in Tozen. Not necessary to bring that up in labor consultation. Yeah.
Just going on, sorry, going with like some of the different offices. So, for example, if someone who's getting a consultation, they went to one of these offices because they believe they weren't paid for their work, which office would I go to for that?
Yeah, so again, that first of all, I'll say that no matter what, if you go to any of the different offices I listed, you can probably get a consultation on any number of issues. But to answer your question, for unpaid wages, that would be the Labor Standards Office or Rodo Kijun Kantokshou. But again, we're not trying to say go to the correct office. That's definitely not the point. You can come to Tozen for a consultation on anything. And actually, you could probably go to Hello Work to get a consultation about unpaid wages. They might send you to Labor Standards Office or even to us. The main point of that was, if you did get a consultation, just make sure, if possible, you know where you went so that we can have an idea of who you spoke with. Yeah. Okay.
As pointed out,
Yeah.
The organizers' main thing is to be more sympathetic and helpful to the person coming for the consultation. Like, don't do what I just did.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing too. Don't if you don't know, you don't know. Maybe we should move on to the second one. So that was tricky moment number one, the labor office, right? Okay, number two.
Okay, so tell me, what kind of contract are you on?
Oh, I don't have a contract. I'm freelance.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the second one. So another one we hear a lot is I don't have a contract. And the truth of the matter is, even if you've never signed a piece of paper that says contract on the top of it, maybe with one exception I can think of, just about everyone here has some kind of contract or some kind of statement of working conditions. Even if it's verbal, that's a contract. So when somebody asks you about your contract, the first thing I would say is that if you ever signed anything in advance of employment with or getting a job here, I'd say make sure that you have that information handy, because that's quite useful. But also know that freelance, for example, is like a cultural term. It can apply to a lot of different things, right? A lot of people consider themselves freelance because they have a lot of different jobs. Those could all be on employment contracts, right? Different kinds of contracts. So the first thing I just wanted to let people know about this I don't have a contract is everyone has a contract. And even if nothing was ever written or there wasn't a formal verbal contract that was made, the terms and conditions of your contract can kind of be pieced together even through the emails that you have, or the general things that you have, the general like rules that you have followed, even if they're kind of understood. So what's an easier way to navigate this so that you don't get too confused? Well, beforehand, maybe think a little bit about if you ever signed anything, because in all likelihood you did. And if you didn't, maybe take a look through your emails and see what the boss in this situation, whoever that might be, told you about the nature of the work and how much you're getting paid. There are some clues you might want to know about that will indicate what kind of contract you're on. So for example, if you are in Shakai Hoken, or if you have paid leave, then it's almost certain that you're on an employment contract. Okay. If it's understood that you're going to have a yearly conversation where they're going to determine if you're going to be there for the next year or not, that's a fixed term contract. If you are on a contract and it says service agreement on the top of it, oftentimes that means that management is claiming that you're what they call an independent contractor, or Gerome Rothman in Japanese, and that has certain implications. And again, these are things that if we get into too much detail here, we could have a whole Tozen Daigaku on that. So what I would say is that everyone has a contract, or pretty much everyone has a contract. The contract can be verbal, the contract can be written. Even if you don't have a written contract, you very much likely have one. And it might be a good idea to go through your emails and go through some of the correspondence that you had with management when you first started to get a sense of what the basic terms of employment were, what the expectations were, and that will help the organizer in the case where it is unclear what kind of contract you're under. That will help the organizer piece together what kind of contract you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like there's also within these, it's also like talking about like the yearly contract or permanent employment,
right?
Things like that.
Yeah. So yeah, we do get that a lot. I don't have a contract. So usually what people mean when they say that is they didn't sign one, but that doesn't mean you don't have one. So let's figure out what the contract is by going through your correspondence and getting a general sense of what you might have. So I might have said, instead of I don't have a contract, it's like, well, I don't remember signing one, but I spoke with the manager, I teach a class, they pay me this amount of money. I guess I don't get paid leave. That kind of stuff helps the organizer figure it out. So again, just keep it in the back of your head. It's up to the organizer to ask you those questions, but if you think about it in advance, it might make it a little easier. Okay. So the third one is going to be one that won't require Oren's help. I'm going to tell a story about a meeting I had with a fictional manager and staff member at my Tozen Daigaku, right? So, by the way, there is no Tozen Daigaku. Tozen is the name of our union. But anyway, just in case anyone gets confused, we're not offering English lessons. But I'm going to tell the story in a way that might make it difficult to understand what's going on. And I want you to try to figure out what might be the problem. So I had this meeting and I want to tell you about it. It was on Tuesday and I had a meeting with the manager of my school and the counselor, and they told me there was a complaint from a student. And he said that she was concerned because she told me to use the textbook, but actually she told me she didn't want to use the textbook. So I told them that if they wanted me to use the textbook, they should ask me. And I thought he was really rude to me.
So, who is he? Who is she?
Yeah. Does everyone see the problem there? So what's the problem?
Pronouns.
Pronouns are the problem. Okay, so
asking me to say pronouns are the problem.
Yeah, I'm asking Oren to say that pronouns are the problem. So that was my goal in this whole conversation. No,
Wow.
not true. So yeah, there's been a lot of conversation, and rightfully so, about making sure that we use people's preferred pronouns, but that's not the pronoun issue that I'm raising here. So oftentimes when we do consultations, people will tell us stories, and this happens very often. And that's that people will drop pronouns, he, she, they, and it can make it really tough. And the number of times I've either been in a consultation or overheard somebody say that kind of, go through that kind of story, and then hearing the organizer have to say, wait a minute, please use proper names. If you can, that is been a frequent issue. So if you do have a story to tell about a conversation in particular, it's important that the organizer know a few things. Again, using names is important. We keep all information confidential. So if you're worried about someone's anonymity, of course, we're responsible for keeping that secret. We do. Also, if you're telling that story, even if it's awkward, it would be much more useful to use the proper names in the story. So if you're repeating, so Hiro-san said that Hiro-san was upset because, that kind of thing might help the organizer know who's saying who to what, and that will, make it more smooth. It'll cut down on interruptions too. People don't like to be interrupted, but if you're in the middle of this really long story, it's actually an inefficient use of your time for us to wait until the end and say, wait, can you go back and say all that again, with proper names? That can be really annoying, but also annoying is to feel interrupted, right? And usually if I interrupt people in stories and consultations, that's usually a big reason. So if you want to avoid that, then, use proper names. And also, what?
not just, if you don't know the name, the role is also good.
Right, or, my assistant manager, the manager, my coworker, the student, those are other ways around it. So long as all the roles are pretty well defined, or pretty well distinct mainly, that helps the organizer get through it. So yeah, and also so that's what you want. And you want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, and, those kinds of conversations, like the one I said about a student complaint, that can be really harrowing and really scary for you. And, you probably want to make sure that the organizer gets it, understands what's happening. So, yep, proper names. So, should we move on?
Gerome needs to know that.
Gerome needs to know that Gerome needs to move on to the next category. Okay.
Okay.
So this is another one that I will start, and we can just look at Oren's reaction. I'm going to continue the story about this conversation that we had with the counselor. Okay. So anyway, my boss, Hiro-san, using the proper names now, so Hiro-san. He told me that he wanted to have a meeting with me, but then he had to take this trip to Kyoto. He said he always wanted to go to Kyoto, and started talking to me about like why Kyoto was this a place he's always wanted to go to. And he was telling me about all the shrines and temples that he wanted to go to. And then so he went there. I think he was there for 2 weeks, was it? Yeah, I think he was there for 2 weeks. And then during the 2 weeks, he had all of these personal emergencies, and then he came back, and then we resumed the conversation about this issue with the complaint. And what he told me about the complaint was this, that the student wanted to use the textbook, and that I persisted in not doing that. And I disagree with that. Okay. So,
okay.
Oren, what do you think was the tricky moment I fell into?
So the story about the trip to Kyoto, like that doesn't necessarily help with what we're talking about. Like,
right,
it's when we're giving a story, when we're recounting things, we often think, well, everything is important, but often we can go into tangents very easily. Yeah,
I think that I used a kind of extreme example. I don't think most of the people who come in for consultations would mistake details of their boss's trip to Kyoto as something that was relevant to a conversation about student complaints, unless it happened to be. But the main point that I was making with that is that sometimes it can be very difficult to get to sort through in your own mind if you're about to do a consultation, what details are like relevant to understanding the situation, and what details are maybe things that either aren't relevant, or maybe something that's background information that would be useful later, but not now. Like, for all we know, that trip to Kyoto might have had something to do with the rest of the story, but it didn't sound like it from what I was saying when I went through it. So again, it is the job of the organizer to redirect the conversation towards the who, what, where, when, how, and why stuff, and to keep us focused. And there's just a few things I want you to keep in mind as the person coming to the consultation. It is possible that if it does seem like we're getting off track, that the organizer might gently interrupt you and say, wait a minute, is the trip to Kyoto relevant? And sometimes that'll dislodge the situation. So just be prepared for that. The organizer isn't doing that to be rude. The organizer is trying to make sure that we make the best use of our time, and it is your time too. You don't want to, be on the call forever, or in the consultation forever. Also, it might be a good idea to make a timeline before you go to the consultation, and really look at the timeline and say, okay, what are the details that, if I didn't know anything about this, would be relevant, and what would be maybe distracting? Because the other issue with having to navigate that is sometimes it'll take the focus away from the actual problem, and you want to again keep the focus on what it is that you ask for advice about. So this might be something that, while it is absolutely the responsibility of the organizer to jump in there and help you direct your focus. It's also a good idea if you can do a little bit of the pre-work that will make it maybe easier on you and also help the organizer do that more efficiently with you. So think about which details are relevant, which aren't. And if you don't know, then of course include them and we can sort through it in the consultation. So, okay.
There's also the part, like an added thing, maybe like the organizer could also keep in mind that they need to sort of maybe focus on like pointed questions. Like if the organizer is worried that like things maybe sort of going off on a tangent, it's as you said, it's on the organizer to keep things focused. So for an organizer, what we need to make sure like we're doing our best to help the person coming for the consultation to hit the important notes that we need to know so we can help them the best.
Sure. Yeah. Like if that happened to me in a consultation where some seemingly irrelevant detail or set of details come into it, I might just ask, like, is the details of the Kyoto trip, is that relevant to this, or or even ask the question rather than is that relevant, can be considered off-putting, something like, oh, well, what does that have to do with the story? That would be really bad. No, like, what is, does this trip to Kyoto feature anywhere in the consultation? And then sometimes members will, prospective members will just say, oh, actually, no, I guess it doesn't, and then move on. So yeah, there are ways to go about doing it. So yeah, it's more about like, it's not about saying to you, don't come in with a bunch of irrelevant stuff. That's not what we mean. But if you think about like sorting through what would be the most important details versus the stuff that maybe we can either come to later or may not be as relevant, that might even help you think about the issue as well. I think that sometimes part of it is also helping the prospective member or the person getting the consultation think about their own, concerns at the workplace in a way that is, that you can wrap your brain around it, so yeah.
Like, one of the main things we often ask is, like, can you give us a timeline of things? Like, we might do it after the consultation, like towards the end of the consultation, as maybe a part of almost like homework for then like a follow-up consultation. But also what we've had, I think I've had maybe a consultation like this, you've had a consultation like this, where the person coming for the consultation has already made like a timeline of events, which can help us like get through things incredibly quickly and help us keep
and on that note, it's good to be prepared with the timeline in advance, particularly a focused, efficient one that focuses on the specifics to the concern that you have, the issue that brought you to the consultation. Don't be surprised if even you email the organizer, that the organizer asks you to run through things again anyway, because there is that element of you can read a bunch of text, but it's not all really reinforced. It's hard to commit, excuse me, it's hard to commit all of that stuff to memory. So I would say that you might have to repeat some stuff that you wrote down, and that usually I do that no matter what. Like I might look at the email and try to get a general sense of what's going on, but I don't consider myself well versed in your concern unless we've talked, right? So okay.
I was just going to add, like, even before the consultation, there's kind of a few things we often ask for, like as pre-preparation, things like what's maybe your visa status, where are you from, right? Kind of what contract you're on, and we sometimes do ask for like a timeline of events.
I mean, being completely honest, for those of you who've gotten emails from me, you probably just get me saying something like, hi, my name is Gerome. I am an organizer here at Tozen Union. We should have a consultation. Part of the reason why I'm doing this I suggested this Tozen Daigaku is I thought there might be a few things I can put in that email as well to help people prepare better. Sometimes I don't think to do that. So that's actually some pretty good advice that I got from the trainee organizer, Oren. So yeah, no, I think that's good. Again, I don't want you going away from this thinking I got to do a bunch of homework before I even talk to the organizers. No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Remember, this is suggestions. If you have some time and you can do a little bit of prep in advance, it makes it go smoother, but we do lots of consultations. And if you want to talk about your boss's dog, then, you know, we'll handle it. So, okay. So the next one is again, another one that I will start, but then, Lauren, I'll ask you to do your lines over there.
Yep.
So here we go. Remember at this point in the consultation, Oren had already said something about term limited contracts. And so imagine I'm responding to that point. Like, so, Oren, you'd mentioned something about term limited contracts, but, you know, I have a friend my friend's a lawyer, and I told the lawyer my situation, and the lawyer said that, you know, management can't do this. And if they don't renew my contract, I can sue and I definitely can win. They said something about an article of labor contract law that you know, the management won't, you know, non-renew me, and so, you know, I think I really do have a case, and a lawyer told me.
Can you tell me which lawyer?
I mean, it's a friend. I can't really. I mean, it's just my wife's friend.
Yeah, no. That's wrong.
Okay,
yeah.
let's stop it here. Yeah. So first of all, like I think going nah, that's probably wrong. Might not be the best approach to this particular one. I'll confess that we do joke around a little bit around the office about my friend's a lawyer, and the reason is because that you know, we do hear it a lot, and I think that sometimes people do forget that, you know, there's a lot of laws, right? And there's specialties within law, all kinds of specialties. You know, and labor law, even in itself, labor law is a set of specialties. There's Shakai Hoken law, which is the social insurance law. There's trade union law, Rodo Kumiaiho. There's yeah, there are all these different laws, and labor lawyers are sometimes management side, they're sometimes union side, and just to be honest, like any other sort of highly specialized profession, a lot of times if somebody studied it, they have a general idea. Usually what we get isn't completely wrong when we hear this, but Tozen Union has legal advice from people I think are the best labor lawyers in Japan, and very well experienced. And they're aware of a lot of the trends in the courts about how courts are ruling on things. They are, you know, you've seen some of them on Tozen Daigaku, very knowledgeable, not just about what the law says, how the law has evolved, but also what the prospects are of anything that turns into legal action of it succeeding. So what does this mean? Am I telling you don't talk to your friend who's a lawyer before you come to the consultation? Absolutely not. If you've got some friends that know the law, of course, you know, it's likely that they know something about it. But just do be aware that they may tell you something that turns out to be, I want to say not true, but a little bit more complicated, or a little bit, you know, different between the legal textbook and the reality in the courtroom, or the reality out there in the different enforcement offices. So if you do get legal advice prior to coming to Tozen, just take it with a grain of salt, because you just need to be aware of the limitations that come from perhaps a patent attorney telling you something about labor law, right? Also, there's another thing too. I've noticed that some lawyers do consultations, like they offer free consultations for, you know, foreigners in Japan, for example. We do have a lot of people who are not from Japan who come for consultations, and sometimes we've noticed people maybe tell you what you want to hear so that you'll buy a bunch of legal services. And so we want to protect you a little bit too. So, you know, don't put down a bunch of money for an attorney unless you've done your homework. One way to do your homework is just to ask us. Oren asked me, what law firm is it? I used to ask that question. I still do, but oftentimes, it turns out that I don't know the law firm, which is actually a pretty good sign these days that maybe, we either need to meet this person because this is a brilliant labor lawyer that we don't know about. That's happened. That has actually happened. So do tell us. But also that sometimes it might be somebody that's outside the specialty, and just be prepared that we'll want to double check it, that we might say, no, actually it's a little bit different, and just be open-minded about it. That I think will help you have a smoother time, and also be a little emotionally prepared to be, if you were told the thing you wanted to hear from the lawyer, that it may not turn out to be the way reality plays out.
Yeah, this kind of also overlaps with one of our previous Tozen Daigaku's on sort of legal precedents. Like, even if it could say, or like our understanding of it in the labor law is like, yes, you are owed money, you have this case and you will win. It could almost say it in the laws, but when it comes to looking at how courts have ruled on this, as you touched on before, sometimes it doesn't go our way.
Sure.
Like, you could have evidence after evidence after evidence, but if a company kind of says like, oh, no, that's not right, or like, nothing is ever like 100% win.
Yeah, nothing is a slam dunk. I mean, courts are political too, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next section, but there's also a problem with I talked to a lawyer that sometimes there's too much of a legal focus on the issue at work. Like, just because something is legal or something is illegal, just because something is that doesn't make it pleasant or unpleasant. It doesn't make it something you want or don't want. And so and if even if you do have a case for a court, you may not relish the prospect of what that entails, so I am actually spoiling the next section here, but yeah, I think it's a good lead in. So why don't we just do that part? Go ahead, Oren, please ask me the next question for the consultation.
So so we've kind of been through everything. Do you have any further questions or queries?
Yeah, you've skipped.
Oh, sorry.
Don't skip ahead on the script.
Yeah. Okay. You spend a good time on this.
Yeah.
So
criticizing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What are your aims? What do you want to achieve?
Well, I think I really have a case, and I want the union to open up a case for me. I feel like I feel like I'm going to be non-renewed, and I just think there's a case, right? So can you do a case? Okay. So the issue that I'm pointing out here is with the word case, right? I want the union to open a case for me, or let's do a case, right? So basically there's a lot going on here. So the first is the issue that we were starting to cover, and I bled into it, which is not everything that you do when you go for a consultation or come to the union with it. It's not like, we're this help center, and if you come here and you tell us the problem is sufficient, we'll like open an account and start working on that problem. It doesn't really work like that. So like the first thing is, when you think about what you want, you actually want the problem to be resolved, or you want to do something to make a situation better. So before you go to the consultation, it would be helpful to think about what could change about your current circumstances that would make you feel better, that would make you feel like you don't have this problem anymore. So taking the example that we gave you as the theme of the consultation, you're worried about non-renewal. Well, one thing that will absolutely square the problem away is if you found out that you're being renewed. Okay, so then the whole fear of that one renewal will go away. But there might be other things that you can think about that you would prefer to merely one renewal, like, I don't know, not having to go through the renewal process every year. Or perhaps there was something that happened in that conversation that you felt was inappropriate. Maybe a manager said something that was excessively harsh to you, and you'd like some mechanism to deal with that particular thing that made you upset, right? So sometimes when I ask people, what do you want? They say they want an apology, or they want, something like that. And again, whatever we want, these things are more or less attainable depending on, varying circumstances. But it is important to know what specific end goal you're seeking. Like, the goal isn't for us to have a case, if, whatever that would mean. The goal is to try to resolve the problem. Another issue with the I want to do a case, or I want to open a case, or I have a case, is that when you go to a labor union in particular for a consultation, when you come to Tozen Union for a consultation, we serve one very specific sort of function as an organization. We use the solidarity at the workplace to build workplace-based organizations, to bargain with management, to improve the working conditions of our members. And so whatever the problem is, even if there is no problem, even if you come in saying you'd like more money, or you come in saying that you like working at your place, you just want to be able to work there forever, or whatever the issue is, we're likely to direct you towards, have you talked to your coworkers about this? Do your coworkers feel the same way? Do they want to, are they interested in joining a union and building an organization at, my fictional Tozen Eikaiwa, to pressure the evil Tozen Eikaiwa management into agreeing with, a series of union demands? Is this something that you would be interested in, right? So this is the work that we do as an organization. We build workplace-based organizations, we bargain with management, and we use the collective power at the workplace to improve working conditions, whether or not the improvements are based in legal minimums, or just things that would make life at that particular workplace so much better. So it's a good idea to think about what your goals are in this conversation, what would make things better for you. But also, before you come to Tozen Union, knowing what we do, at least a little bit, you can always ask us in the consultation, but being aware that for lack of a better way to put it, we have an agenda. We want to build organizations at workplaces so that we can strengthen your solidarity at the workplace. Use your solidarity at the workplace to strengthen your bargaining position at the workplace. And that is the direction that our work heads us in. Now, before you move on, there's one last point. If it turns out that it is something that's kind of straightforward, like an unpaid wages claim, or you're trying to apply for unemployment benefits and you don't know how, of course you can come to us with that consultation. We may end up directing you towards one of the offices that can assist you more directly with that. Right, there are help centers out there that cover these things. So Tozen is still a good place to go, but it will help you and the organizer to have a pretty good idea of what your goals are. Do you want to build a union, or do you just want this one specific problem solved? And if you really do want to sue them, right, then we might be able to refer you to legal services, though more often than not, you might find that that is not the best option, but we'll just leave it there. Oren, did you have anything to add to this part?
Yeah, kind of, it's overlapping from the previous point as well. Like, as we've kind of said, like, when we have a case, even like going to labor standards office who deal with unpaid wages, like, we can maybe spend a lot of time going back and forth, and they might say, like, here we can't really do anything, we can't properly rule on it, but if you take it to court, you could probably win it. That is, in a way, it's quite a difficult thing for us as well, like, and for the person coming for the consultation, like, as we said, like, nothing's a slam dunk, but it's also going by court. is very expensive.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there are times when it's appropriate to use the court system. It's a lot easier to use the court system if you're part of a union where you have coworkers that can share some of the both financial and time burden of that. But you don't want to go right away to sue them. Like if your brain goes in that direction, then you're skipping some steps. Like if we form a union, sometimes we like to to start with negotiations first to try to resolve it. I mean, I say sometimes that's actually the very first thing we always try to do. So I don't want people always thinking it's important to know your legal rights. But you don't want to just think in terms of your legal rights. You also want to think about what the possibilities are at the workplace, or even if you might get advice from your organizer just about some basic office politics. Try to send this email, try to word it this way, because it takes a while to do anything. It takes a while to organize unions. It takes a while if you're going to file a lawsuit, that's definitely going to take a while. Yeah. And in the meantime, you still have to get along. So just again, having clear ideas about what it is that you want, and also not being kind of so legally focused on this must be a case, so we must open up some kind of case. I think that will give you make you a little more prepared to use the time with the organizer to find solutions and find out what the real paths are to resolution of the different issues that you've brought up.
Yeah, sorry.
I think
I was just going to say sort of what as you said, like one of our main goals is building unions,
right? Yeah.
Like
I'd say that is a huge part of our goal.
Yeah. So as the saying goes, like, or probably to misquote, solidarity is half of the battle. Like, it is the whole battle.
Yeah, you know what I was going to say.
Yeah, like if you can't work with co-workers, to try and build a local, or if it's things like, oh, me and my co-workers aren't being paid properly, or me and my co-workers aren't doing this, but you're the only person actively fighting it, it can be very difficult to win or to even fight if your co-workers aren't also there to sort of say, like, yeah, all of us, this affects all of us, we all need to be here together for it.
Yeah. And again, I guess just to close that out, we're not saying, you must come here with 10 coworkers or we won't talk to you or anything like that. We're gonna particularly, like, maybe not so much the organizers, but the members of Tozen have been through the process of talking to their coworkers and inviting them to the meeting and building solidarity and forming unions. And there's a lot involved in that. So by coming to a consultation with that in the back of your head and being open perhaps to coming to a meeting and learning some of the different strategies and that our members know, that can also help you. It's not like you're on your own to build solidarity, but fundamentally, to make permanent change at your workplace, it's not about filing a piece of paper with a government office. To make a permanent, lasting change at your workplace is going to involve building solidarity with your colleagues, ideally bringing them into the union, maybe not our union, maybe another union, but doing it. And then strategically and carefully going about the business of, writing your demands and all of that, that we can talk about if we do a Tozen Daigaku on that process. You don't need to have all of that all of that mapped out before the consultation. I just want to make sure you're aware of what our organization is focused on and why, like I say, opening up filing a piece of paper with a government office isn't necessarily the direction that we're going to recommend, although it might be. So
as you said, like, the courts are political, a lot of it's political, a lot of it is visual. If you've just got one member or one person,
that's true,
fighting these cases, it's not as powerful as multiple people.
Okay, so I think we beat that dead horse nice and dead. Let's move on to my favorite one. This is actually my favorite one on the list, so go ahead, now you can do this part.
Okay. So So we've covered a lot of things so far today. So to kind of almost close things out, do you have any further questions you'd like to ask me?
Well, yes, I want to know, can management fire me?
Well, yes.
Okay, so let's stop there. So this one's actually my favorite because this one happens pretty much at every consultation. And I call it the can they question. Can management, and then insert anything in that sentence. And the answer is yes. It's always yes. So now, what do you really mean when you're asking a can they question? Well, you mean three things. Is it likely? Is it legal? And can we do something about it? And this is the answer to those three questions can be any combination of the three. So based on the story that the organizer has gotten from you, we might be able to assess the likelihood of different outcomes. So you're worried about non-renewal. Can they fire me? Another way of saying, can I be non-renewed? They're the same, right? And so if you say, can they, the answer is, oh, sorry, pardon me. If we're going to ask the question, is it likely? Well, there might be some things we know. We might know the company and how they behave in certain situations. We might know also patterns based on some of the conversations you've had. And we might be able to give you not a percentage. And if you ask for percentages, that's a really tough thing to do, but a general risk assessment of, okay, what do we feel like might happen? There's a certain amount of guesswork to that because you are actually guessing. But we'll try, if you ask, is this likely? Am I likely to be non-renewed? Based on the information you give, we might be able to give you an educated guess of what management is thinking in that moment, for example. The question of, is it legal, right? We've talked a lot about this. I think that it does turn out that a great deal of our consultations we do in Tozen Union are with people from European or countries or North America or maybe Australia. And I think in some of those countries, there's a much more legal focus. And so people equate, I think, it's illegal with they can't do it. And I hate to break this to you, but people break the law all the time. That's the first thing. And the second thing you want to be aware of is that whether or not something is legal, there are often different interpretations of that. Tozen has a position on what is legal in terms of renewals of contracts that is a little bit different than management thinks. And if it does come to a legal, like a third-party legal group, like a group is not the right word, a third-party legal entity like the court, then it will ultimately be up to their judgment. So what we can probably tell you is that our opinion is that this is legal or this is illegal, but also we'll let you know what the trends are, what the legal backgrounds are, maybe even a little bit about what the different arguments are. And that question, is it legal, is never as cut and dry as we want it to be. So if you watch some of the past Tozen Daigaku, you're going to hear a lot of guidelines and a lot of discussion about precedents and things like that. But at the end of the day, it will come down to how well organized you are, maybe even who the judge is if it's a court, who you get at labor standards office. Sometimes there's just a lot of these different variables that get in the way of that question, is something legal or something not legal? Law is not a fixed concept, I'm afraid. So do be prepared for a little bit of nuance to that discussion. And the final one, I think, is the most important question, and that's can we do anything about it? Because at the end of the day, we're not cops. So even if even if your employer is doing something that is legal or could be considered legal, it doesn't mean it's a good thing. It doesn't mean that that's the end of the discussion. As I say, if you think about legal minimums, people don't join unions so that they can win the right to minimum wage. People usually, if they're thinking about wages, want a raise. There might not be a law that says that you can get a raise. And so ultimately can we do anything about it? The maximum chance of us being able as a union to improve the working conditions at your workplace together is if you have built solidarity with your coworkers, and that takes time and it takes some work. But if it is a simple matter of they promised you to pay these wages and they didn't, then there might be some simple solutions we can come to on those kinds of questions. So there are some times when a law is broken and the enforcement mechanisms are kind of weak. And so I would prefer not to give too many specific examples because I don't want to give management valuable information or anything. But I do want to say that, like, you know, we're also able to assess like which legal violations have enforcement mechanisms that are powerful. One good piece of news for everyone, trade union rights are actually quite strong in Japan. And, you know, if management does something, for example, to discriminate against a member or treat them negatively because they're in a union, there are.
Now you're getting ahead of things.
Yeah, sure. Am I? Yeah. And so there are, well, no, but there are, yeah, I guess there are different places there are different things we can do about that. So, you know, that's one thing that we can keep in mind. But as Oren suggested, I might be getting ahead of myself. So anyway, can management questions, again, come to the consultation and you say, can management this, you know, you're going to get probably 3 answers to that question. Just be prepared for that. And if you're more interested in one of those 3 questions, knowing them in advance, maybe it helps you focus the questions you're asking. I'd like us to move on to another one of my favorites. Yay. Okay, so.
Okay, so let's get into the role. So, okay, so yeah, you're currently on a fixed term contract.
Sorry, what kind of contract?
A fixed term contract.
Fixed term.
Yeah,
contract.
so because you're being renewed like once a year.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. And so with this, it does also kind of leave you vulnerable to non-renewal, which is actually kind of a big problem here.
Yeah, see, this is the thing, like in America, it's nothing like this. Like, you know, these fixed term contracts, they don't have that. Like, you know, people, you have a job, you have a job. I mean, it's just the labor situation in America is just so much better. And I mean, in America, you could sue for what's it called, wrongful dismissal, right?
Yeah, but in Japan, you actually have labor rights, unlike America.
What? Yeah. Okay, so a couple problems with that. First of all, you know, I do think that we shouldn't be too glib about the home countries of the people who you know, visit us for consultations. But we do get that a lot of times people will make comparisons between Japan and their home country. As I said, we do get a lot of people from abroad who are working here, people who are, you know, we're a multicultural union. So many of, we have members from around the world, and we get, you know, consultation, we get consultees from people who come from pretty much everywhere. And yeah, it was a little bit of a parody of that, but there's 2 issues with what I did there. One, a lot of times we don't fully understand what the situation is in our home countries. And actually, it's a common myth that the labor laws in Japan, for example, are weaker than in the United States. In most ways, that's not true. But more importantly, I think it's really important to keep in mind before you go to a consultation that whatever the labor situation is in your home country, we're in Japan. And so, you know, whether or not it's a certain way in the United States or in Europe, this is the context we're in. And so there are many different problems that are focused, that are more common here in Japan, perhaps, than in whichever country you happen to be here from. But also there's, whatever the laws are in the United States, they don't apply here. And so it can be very difficult, even sometimes when we do collective bargaining, sometimes our members want to bring things up about how things are in other countries. And while I do understand that it's nice to talk about global standards being a certain way, and we want to aspire to that, in general, the cultural context you're in is the one that's going to govern what goes on. And so I think that if you come to a consultation and you say you're your focus is on comparing the way it is here to where you are at home, while that's a perfectly natural thing to do, it's also a bit of a distraction. And I think that, again, it's the organizer's job to redirect you and gently remind you that in the United States, there's actually 50 little governments that have all kinds of different labor laws. And by the way, none of those governments have any power over here. But also to make sure that, you're aware of what the situation actually is here, because it sometimes does turn out that there's more options to do something about your problems at the workplace here than there might have been in your home country. At the end of the day, though, I hate to say this, it isn't really relevant, even if one thing that happens to be better in the United States is that public employees, there are more opportunities for union representation than they have in Japan. That's true. For example, that's one example. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really mean anything to us here. We have to, fight for representation of public employees in Japan, and whether or not it's that way in different countries. That was an example. Won't matter as a whole lot, I'm afraid. So focus on where you are, learn about be open to learning about the situation here. And it might be frustrating if your impression is that things might be better in other countries. But at the end of the day, we've got to integrate here and be a force for good to improve working conditions in Japan. And there's a lot we can do right here. So, keep your mind here.
Yeah.
So
it's also not to be too negative on America, it's also been incredible seeing what this massive unionization movement spreading across America as well lately. Yeah,
I would actually like to contradict myself and do a Tozen Daigaku where we do some comparisons of the labor situation around the world. I think it's good for our members to be as aware of that as possible. And there are some really heartening things happening in the United States. So I want people to be interested in it. I don't want people maybe to think that it's going to convince a judge, for example, if we say, but in America, it's like this, even if it's true, you know what I mean? Like, it certainly doesn't convince management, so I want that. It's more like that. I know we have several people in Tozen who study labor law around the world, and that is a fascinating pursuit. I like to keep up myself, but when we're doing a consultation about if you're going to get a renewal next month, maybe we need to focus on the country we're living in. Yeah. So, I have two more, and they're a bit of sensitive topics, so I don't want to role play them because I don't really want to be super glib about it. I want to make sure that I instead just tell you these are two tricky situations that come up that are actually a little awkward for me sometimes. The first one is that, like, sometimes when people have consultations, they're upset and they might say some things about either their coworkers or the country they're living in that in a different context might come across as a little bit, let's say, stereotypical. If you fall into one of these where you say, oh, how I've heard people say, for example, how Japanese people are, and then say something like this. I understand people are upset. And if you slip into that talk, I'm not, going to walk away with some terrible impression of who you are. We're all on a journey to fight our biases and become more inclusive in our outlook. I hope that we're all on that journey. And of course, the time that's most perilous on that journey is when we're stressed. And so I do understand that. And so, yeah, if you do walk into a consultation and you say something like that, I'm not going to sit in judgment of you, but I will point out that, our goal is to build solidarity across nationalities. Nationalities should not matter. We're all workers. We're all in this together. And injustice at the workplace is a global phenomenon. Yeah. So I just want to invite people to, think about that, because it can be a little awkward and uncomfortable. And of course, if it does come up in a consultation, I will say something. I'll try to be as gentle about it as I can. I'll remind people that, it's not really about an entire culture or an entire people. It's actually a tool that sometimes, I hate to say it, that management uses to divide us is nationality. Not always, but sometimes. But we should be, we should think about our working conditions and maybe not about where people are from, in terms of trying to leave that awkwardness level down. It's even awkward for me to talk about it here on camera, so I hope that we can do a couple of things with this. So I want to be sensitive that I know when people are upset, they say things. And, I think that that's not something that, that's not something that's beyond, not something that's not beyond me either. But at the same time, if you can avoid it, I think it would help make things smoothly. So again, I don't like to call it a mistake, but it's tricky, right? If someone's upset and they say something like that, it can create a tricky moment in a consultation that would have gone more smoothly if we didn't have that. And, we as the organizers have to perhaps watch ourselves too. We got to be thinking about how to be the most inclusive union in the world, and to not let that game of having arbitrary factors like what country is printed on our passport dictate our impression of people. So please keep that in the back. Is there anything you'd like to say about this, Warren?
Kind of just building on what you said previously, like as foreigners in Japan, well, there are ways, admittedly, that we might be treated differently in the workplace as our role, not as who we are as people.
Right.
So as an API worker, I work with many Japanese nationals. And so it's just like, oh, you are the native speaking teacher.
Right.
They are, as it's even said by the company, they are the Japanese side of the company. So there is divided lines within company structure and company hierarchy.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we who are below management, be it foreign or like Japanese national, we're not divided, not like in like where we are in the position. Like we need to work together to secure rights and improvements for both sides. Like we shouldn't be focusing on petty things or like putting things like, oh, that, as you said, like when people sort of say, oh, that's just how these people are, like be it based on any nationality, that's how the English are, that's how the Americans are, that's how so and so are, like that's not productive for any movements. No, not at all. And we need to build each other, we need to build solidarity. So across border lines, across state lines, across nationalities, it's all, we need solidarity. Yeah, and one thing that sometimes we struggle with, this is getting a little off the topic of consultations, but because we have a lot of foreigners in Tozen, a lot of people think we're the foreign union, and that's not, we're a Japanese union, and we have Japanese members, or we see ourselves as multinational, many kinds of natural, multinational, multicultural union. And again, like I do realize that a lot of times when these conversations happen, people are emotional, and there's things have happened at work, and so like I don't want to, I don't want people to feel I don't want people to feel humiliated by the notion that we slip into these things when it happens, and that but at the same time I also think that it's very important to keep in the back of your mind that we will not succeed as a union, Tozen will not succeed if we see it as many sides. The Japanese side of the company, the foreign side of the company. We will not succeed as a union if we divide our solidarity based on nationality. And this doesn't just happen because like foreigners versus Japanese, right? This might happen among, as you pointed out, the different nationalities at the workplace. I've heard people say things like, oh, I'm working with these British guys and blah, 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 something like that. You know what I mean? And then again, when you're stressed, you might say things that you don't mean.
And oftentimes I think what happens is that, that can create not just, some that might even create embarrassment for you as the person who comes to the consultation and then remembers you said it later. It's good to avoid that. But also, if you slip here and there, our job as organizers is to help build that solidarity. So I actually think we should move on at this point. Yeah. So I was just gonna say, like, how much so how are we doing on time?
So far we've just an hour
and a quarter in.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have one more to do, and
Yeah.
then I think we can kind of close things out. But the last one is about harassment. So many of our members come to us with any number of unpleasant situations that have come up at the workplace. And if you're working somewhere and you're kind of forced to work, you're at work, so you can't leave, anything that's unpleasant, depending on how unpleasant it is, you might assess as harassment. And you might say, I think this is harassment, right? We get that a lot. If you feel like you have experienced a form of harassment, the two most common complaints we get, of course, are sexual harassment and power harassment, which are two phenomenons, types of harassment that are described in the Japanese context quite often. I want you to ask us about it, of course, like, does this constitute harassment, or I'm feeling harassed? I don't want you to at all not ask us that question. We need to address that in the consultation. And if there is harassment, we need to do something about it, or we need to figure out what the right steps are. But I do think it would be a good idea, if you think you're being harassed, to familiarize yourself with what the legal concepts are behind harassment, because there's harassment that the very broad category of things that feel like you're being harassed. And then there's the specific forms of harassment and the different guidelines and possibly laws that the government has passed to define these terms. And the thing that can be very frustrating for people who come to consultations is when they say they're being harassed, and we as the organizers have to explain. So we understand that you see this as harassment, but this is what the legal guidelines are for harassment. This is what sexual harassment means. This is what power harassment means. And we're not saying that because we don't think that your feelings of harassment are illegitimate or judging you in any way for jumping to that term, but we do, again, part of the consultation process is to do what we can to make you aware of, what your options are, and also what your legal rights are in these situations. And if you really think you're being harassed and you have a little time, prior to going to your consultation, I believe Tozen has done both a power harassment and a sexual harassment, Tozen Daigaku.
I'm not sure about the sexual harassment, but we've done maternity.
No, I know we did sexual harassment. I remember we did that. Well, not did sexual harassment, but did a Tozen Daigaku on sexual harassment. But so I recommend that you take a look through that stuff. And the reason would be just so you know, like, what the law says about it, and what the different what companies are supposed to do about it too. So there are very clear norms and standards and guidelines about how companies are supposed to handle complaints of harassment. And it would be good to familiarize yourself with what they are. If you don't have time for that, of course, the organizers can walk you through it during the consultation. Also, remember that if the law doesn't define what's going on with you at your workplace as harassment, that doesn't mean there's nothing that can be done. It just might mean that you might not be able to use a mechanism that's designed specifically for these harassment areas. And I guess the last thing that I want to say about it is that it can be a really vulnerable situation, and when you're feeling harassed. But I would actually advise getting a labor consultation if possible before filing any complaint with management. So another one that's kind of adjacent to this is people will come to the consultation telling me that they've already filed a harassment complaint. And there can be a lot of problems that come from that. Like, it's a good idea to get some advice before you file a piece of paper at work that it could end up being used against you. So definitely, if you feel like you're experiencing harassment at the workplace, you can come to Tozen Union for a labor consultation. There are any of the offices that I mentioned before might also be able to offer consultation services, get some background and some advice. And that might, even if you don't join the union, it might at least give you some ideas about what are the more productive things to do, as well as, what pitfalls you might want to avoid in trying to address a harassment complaint you have on your own at the workplace. So just something to keep in mind about harassment. Before we hit questions, I'd like to just wrap up a little bit. So anyway, this whole Tozen Daigaku for today was 10 things that come up in labor consultations, and I called them tricky moments. We intentionally didn't call them mistakes. And the reason we didn't call them mistakes is because we don't believe that you, as the person getting a consultation, can make mistakes. Like, you come in and you don't commit an act of violence during the consultation, but short of that, it's hard for somebody who's seeking advice to make mistakes. And so I, again, want to repeat this. I've probably oversold this, but I don't want people to worry that, I didn't do a good job in my consultation. That isn't, I want the organizers to worry about that. I don't want you to. We're giving this advice mainly because, one, these are things that come up a lot, and it might just give you a few shortcuts. And also, your time is limited, both in general and, the organizers are often, have a next appointment they have to get to or whatever. And, we want to be as respectful of one another's time as we possibly can be. And it would respect your time more as somebody that's coming in for a consultation if you knew in advance about how to approach it, so that you're not maybe needing to cover ground that you could have covered in advance. To me, I prefer to have a heads up about that kind of stuff. So, but again, if you don't want to worry about it, you want to do all 10 of these things, you're still welcome for a consultation. I don't know if we have any questions or comments or what, but is there anyone who wanted online who had some questions?
There is.
Okay, well, let's go for it.
Are you sure? Are you ready?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. So we've got one question so far.
Okay.
Well, two questions so far.
Okay.
So let's start with this question. So from our good friend BB, I'm not sure this is a good question, but what does one do when co-workers aren't interested in a union or think they are already in a union, being in the union, the university school union already? Is recruitment outside of one's department a valid option, or are there other approaches?
The $1 million question in Tozen is always going to be, how do we recruit our coworkers? First of all, I think that the second part of the question was about recruiting outside your department. And I think that the best place to start recruiting is wherever your relationships are. So recruitment's a funny thing because there's a process. So when you join the union, that doesn't mean that the union exists as far as management is concerned. And so we don't want people to talk to management about the union or to reveal that they're in the union or anything like that. That's something that we do together as an organization. And the reason we do that together as an organization, there's many reasons, but an important one for you to know is that, there's a risk that if, management does decide to break the law and retaliate against you because you mentioned to them that you happen to be in the union, there are things that the union Tozen can do about it. That stuff is harder if we haven't already decided to do what's called a formal declaration. That is to say, hand management a document informing them of the union and its membership. If we don't have that paper trail, it's harder to defend your rights to organize. So what that does with recruitment is you need to talk to people, but you need to talk to people that you have a good enough relationship with that maybe they're not going to also be talking a lot about the union and potentially exposing people to risk of retaliation. So like I said, it can be a tricky moment. So the advice that I would give BB is talk to anyone about joining the union that you have relationships with, and it shouldn't matter what role they're in. You could be a teacher. This person could be working in the office. This person could be working in the cafeteria. This person can be Japanese. This person could be, Portuguese. It does not, that part doesn't matter. The foothold, the starting point is to get the people together with whom you have solidarity. And then from there, of course, it's likelier that, more of your relationships will be inside your department than outside your department, but not certain. A pitfall we run into is it's often the case that the people that you're closest with at the workplace are people that are within your culture group or your language group. And so, it's not bad to start there, but it's very counterproductive to limit yourself to that. So did I get the main thrust of the question? Oh, what to do if no one's interested? It's about it's about time and patience. And I've been here long enough that I've seen year after year after year go by, and there's one person who's been kind of trying to talk to his or her coworkers, and seem to make no progress. But then either something will happen, some big moment, like COVID-19 or a restructuring or any number of things that will generate interest, or sometimes it seems to come out of nowhere. So what I would say is stick with it, and as hard as this could be, try not to get discouraged, because we have stories in Tozen where I think we had one member from Shane for something in the neighborhood of 5 years before that got going, and now Shane local is one of our biggest locals. So if you if you give it that, you've got to give it a chance, and it may not work out, but at the very least, you got to be patient, because in almost all circumstances takes a lot of time. If they think they might be in another union, that's an interesting thing. Maybe try to find out what union they're in. They might be in another union, and we don't want to necessarily raid other unions members. It's not necessarily, we don't want to do that at all. But there are ways in which Tozen can work with other unions. So maybe get the contact information, and Tozen can try to build links with that union.
Thank you. Yeah, if you've got any other questions, please post them in the chat. We do have one question from Luis Carlet.
Oh, okay. God, that guy.
Saying, what's a Tozen?
What's a Tozen? A Tozen. Tozen is, well, first of all, the name of our organization is Zenkoku Ippan Tokyo Zenadata Union, or in English, Zenkoku Ippan, I said it wrong, Zenkoku Ippan Tokyo General Union. And Tozen is like our nickname. So from the To in Tokyo, the Ze in Zenadata, and I guess the on the end of it. So Tozen Union, Tozen Roso in Tozen Roso. I know Lewis is watching, so he's definitely thinking about all of my pronunciation, and I'm sure I'm going to get many notes on it. But an interesting fact about Tozen Union, if you're interested, is it's also a pun, because one way to sort of say it's obvious that you should do something in Japanese is to say that it's Tozen or Tozenda. So sometimes we might say Kumiai ni hairu no wa Tozenda, which means of course you should join a union. So that's Tozen. And Tozen Union has what we're I don't know the exact amount, but we're just over 400 members now. 29 locals. Locals are chapters. 130-ish now, yeah. And 30 chapters, most of them based on workplaces, one or two based on industries such as our ALT local, which is with ALTs, or we have a university chapter as well. So yeah, I would say that we're in mostly like multicultural workplaces. So we have membership in education, both something like English conversation schools or language schools in general. We have a couple of French schools. We're in publishing. Our members are working publishing. We have a couple of factories as well. So we're a pretty diverse group of workers. So yeah.
Oh, good. Another question.
Is this from a similar person?
Yes. I own a small language school in Roppongi. Is there a legal way to get rid of a union from the workplace? And what would be the best way to go about doing that?
No.
But can management kick out union members from the workplace?
So this is a good way to reframe that. So people do ask that question a lot. Well, can management fire me for being in a union? And so, then we can take that down to the or in the case of what Lewis for somebody who works at a anyway.
With Lewis.
Anyway, let's just say Lewis. So is it likely? I would say it's actually unlikely. The kinds of retaliation that happen due to union activity, we don't deal with a lot of and then they fired me right after we declared. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's clearly illegal. But it doesn't. I would say that that's not usually the reaction we get. So it isn't super likely, but if it would be helpful to have a consultation so that we can maybe learn a little bit about the history of the place you're working at. It's even possible that Tozen has already got a few workers there or has already had long-standing labor relations with your company. So, you want to find out, there needs to be more background than that to determine if it's likely. Is it legal? No. And can we do something about it? If we've organized a union and management does something to retaliate against our membership, then it is considered what's called an unfair labor practice in trade union law, or tororo koi. Another Tozen Daigaku that we should get around to sometimes to talk about those. And there are measures that we can take involving using the Labor Commission or National Labor Relations Board might be another English translation of Roro Inkai to deal with that. So while I do think that my fellow organizer was asking a flippant question, fears of retaliation do come up a lot in discussions of union activity. And of course, we should address them on a workplace specific basis, but of course, it's not legal to do it. Okay. Is there anything else in the chat?
Nothing as of yet.
Yeah, so we're gonna ask one last time. So while Oren asks that question, I just want to remind everyone that whether or not you're a Tozen member, if you have questions or you want to do a consultation, you can email us at info@Tokyo General Union. No, wait a minute. Sorry. Scratch that. I was trying to think to not do that, and then I did it again. I did exactly what I didn't want to do. info@tozenunion.org. I guess we'll put that in the links for the show if we can here. And yeah, so and then we'll schedule a consultation with you. And of course, we can meet in person. I do a lot of consultations online these days using Zoom, but of course we can use your preferred platform. We do keep things confidential, so you don't need to worry about that. We won't call management or anything like that. And it's a good way to get some basic background. Even if you just want to get some background about Tozen or you read something on our site that interested you, please get in touch.
Yeah.
Is that it?
So far, no other questions.
Okay.
But yeah, kind of just adding to things that we've previously said. Like, yeah, as the general labor movement goes, it's intersectional. Like, we are united as workers, and we should be united across race, gender, sex, sexuality, etc. Like, we need to be building up together to sort of fight for our rights and make sure that we are protected. Because the management class is united, and so for a strong working class or strong labor movement, we also need to be united.
Yep. and really, when you look at the mission of Tozen Union, it is to bring everyone together, build solidarity at your workplace. That's the main thing. So I'm just going to run through the 10 one last time, just point for point, and then I think we wrap up. So just remember, if you visit an office to get a consultation, find out the name of the office, ideally in English or Japanese. Try to find out information about your contract. And even if you didn't get like a solid piece of paper that says, this is your contract, right? You might be able to piece together some information about your contract that your organizer will find useful, with some details like, are you getting paid leave, or what are the basic terms and conditions of employment, even if they're all verbally decided. If you're going to tell us a story about something that happened during your time at work, some meeting you had, if possible, use proper names as much as possible, or at least clearly defined roles so we know who's talking to who about what. Think in advance, if possible, about what background is relevant to the specific problem you are trying to address, and what might be maybe a bit of a distraction or something that could be covered later. A lot of long stories about your boss's vacation to Kyoto might not be the most relevant thing. Just be aware that if you do seek legal advice in advance of talking to Tozen, depending on that lawyer or office's specialty, there might be some slightly different information that we have. And so just be at least emotionally prepared to hear that you heard a more general overview of the situation, and that reality might be a little bit more disappointing. Remember the purpose of Tozen. Like I said, not remember, but keep in mind the purpose of Tozen. We are a labor union, and our mission, our agenda, our objective, our passion is building solidarity at the workplace. And so while we're perfectly happy to refer people to services if your specific issue does require filing a piece of paper with a government agency, we also do much more than that, and our mission is much more focused on long-term workplace-based activism. So keep that in mind. Remember that can management questions are actually 3 questions. Is it likely? Is it legal? And can we do anything about it? While it's good to have a general idea of the situation facing workers around the world, we do have to pay special attention to the Japanese context. Also, sometimes there's a lot of rumors about like how bad it is in Japan compared to other countries. And while Japan definitely has its problems, there are a lot of possibilities for us to improve things here. And finally, the last 2 were that we should always make sure to not drift too far into cultural stereotyping when talking about our problems in the workplace. Sometimes that can be a bit of a distraction, create some discomfort. So just, be aware of that. And if you do think you're being harassed before your consultation, if you have some time, take a look at our Tozen Daigaku on power harassment and sexual harassment to get a general idea of what the government thinks harassment is in comparison to maybe what you're experiencing at the workplace. Being aware of what the options are, and also, if possible, try to avoid filing a harassment complaint before talking to somebody who can give you some advice about the best way to approach it. Those are sort of the 10 main themes that I would say might make your labor consultation a little more smooth, might save you a little bit of time, and also might get your organizer off the Zoom in 45 minutes or so. So anyway, thank you for joining us. I hope you didn't take that all too seriously or too much to heart, but do keep them in mind, I guess.
Yeah.
Oren, thank you for organizing this.
So thank you. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Like and subscribe. And I'm not going to start. Have a good rest of your Sunday, everyone. Tozen da.
And yeah, we will see you next time. Thank you again. Bye.
Oh, a little.